Well, good morning, everybody. How's everybody doing? You good? That didn't sound very Texan. Yeah, there we go. Let's from the diaphragm here, right? Let's get this going. Well, I just want to echo Toby's welcome to everybody, industry partners, government officials, allies and partners in the energy industry, from government, the team that's really going to be necessary to put this all together and make it happen. And so your presence here is really thrilling, and it's going to be a vital contribution to the success of this event and the success of this endeavor. And I'm really delighted to provide some framing thoughts to get us going into what Toby outlined will be just an exciting day, right? I think it's exciting because we're here to talk about, and ideally more than talk about, the use of new nuclear technologies in a maritime context, a really vital and promising development. And I'll say more to just echo off of what Toby said. I think this is really now a matter of when and how and not if. And I'm proud to be involved in this endeavor because this effort really resonates with several key themes that have kind of propelled my professional life. The major drivers, if you will, and I'll try to explain a little bit. So as Toby said, the first act of my career was in the US Navy, and I was a nuclear submariner for 37 years. And in that endeavor, along with all of my colleagues, some of whom were in this room, I was really glad to see some of the team, the Navy team here, Bob Bronska and Dave Lewis and some others. We were all dedicated clearly to supporting the military dimension of national power, right? We contributed to the military power of the United States and its allies. But, national power has many dimensions. And one of the cool things about being a sailor is that while we do certainly contribute to the nation's military element of power, we're also supporting the economic element of national power, right? For the United States, this really became clear around the turn of around 1900, right? When it was clear that we were going to become a global power and we were going to need access to global markets, ports, the sea lanes that allowed us to get to and from there. And so then we needed kind of a global Navy. And this is when we started to think globally as a Navy. And ever since then, the Navy is very proud of its role in enhancing the economic dimension of national power, access to markets and free trade. And as well, sailors are also part of the diplomatic dimension of national power, right? Every single warship is sovereign US territory. And so it's not uncommon that when a Navy ship pulls into a foreign port, the ambassador for that nation, the US ambassador to that nation, will host a reception of high-level dignitaries on board because that's the United States. He's hosting those national leaders in the United States as he invites them down to be on board. And as well, I used to make it clear to my sailors when they went ashore that they were ambassadors of a sort, and in many ways they could be easily the very first American that anybody in the host country might meet. And so, it was always sort of act accordingly, right? Let's be on our best behavior as we run ashore. So at this point, you're probably wondering, what is this guy talking about, right? This is not what I came to be here for. This old sea captain just kind of pining about days at sea. Has he lost it? And the answer might be yes. But there's a little bit more, and I'll try and make that clear. Let's take a look. In retirement, I've continued to look for ways that I can contribute, make a meaningful contribution to national security for the United States and its allies in all of its dimensions. And new nuclear in the maritime sector is one terrific way to do that. So the first slide here talks about energy security. And I think we'd all agree in this room that energy security is national security, right? We sort of need energy to do just about anything that we do. And the demands going forward are remarkable and increasing just about every single news day, right? So when we first started this and I became, part of the Core Power team, they were talking about just the electrification of the United States doubling, within a very short period of time, 20, 30 years. And that was before the advent of artificial intelligence and all of the data centers that are going to allow, the United States to sort of stay ahead in the race for artificial intelligence and, the national security dimension of that whole competition, which has only increased this demand for electricity. And so whether it's data centers, shipping, so many electric vehicles, you name it, so many demands, new demands, that really dictate that we take a hard look at the amount of energy that we're developing, the location of that energy, where it is, and the timing of that energy. So it's not just having the total capacity, the devil and the interesting part is in the details of sort of where and when you provide that. And, maritime nuclear, I think, will be a part of the solution for all three of those questions. Certainly it will add, more energy, just increase the capacity, but also, and along the way of doing that, right, particularly since we're talking about advanced nuclear, it will stimulate the development, the design, the approval, licensing, production of these reactors. So that increases the amount. But because they're waterborne, right, they're mobile, right? And you can deploy them to areas of need when they're required. They're responsive to both the temporal and locational variations. Think disaster relief. I think that there were about 350,000 people lost power here in Houston area when Hurricane Harvey crashed ashore, right? So you can see just kind of these urgent needs for power on short notice and, a significant amount of power as well. And, while we definitely had our challenges here in Houston, of course, as that storm swept across the Caribbean, Barbados, Guyana, other populations were in need of power just as much as we were. And so new nuclear will be a key part of the future in terms of enhancing the energy security of the nation and our allies. Economic power is national power. And so new nuclear benefits the economic dimension of national power. So in addition to kind of the direct enhancement or additional energy that's required, as we already talked about, not only the amount, but where and when, this will generate an economic surge of sorts, right? We're talking about, to just bring this about, we're talking about the creation of an entire workforce, a multidimensional workforce, real jobs of skilled manufacturers, designers, engineers, electricians, metal workers, pipe fitters, operators, shipbuilders, mariners, and many of these jobs could easily be created in areas, opportunity zones around the country, areas where there is this workforce in waiting, this potential workforce, where jobs are so badly needed. And so this new nuclear and maritime can spur on a technical and educational blitz that will have a tremendous economic benefit. And then by linking, persistent and clean energy to shipping, the vision is that the United States will be back in the game in terms of being a major contributor to the shipping industry, enhancing our access to global markets at lower lifetime costs, because we're talking about a system that can propel a giant ship at 30 knots for 30 years, right? So it's very enticing. We'll hear more about that later today. All right, let's keep going. Starting to look like the Olympics here, which is exactly how I want you to think about yourselves, the Olympic athletes of nuclear, all right? We're going to touch on military security, and military security, military power is national power. Many of these technologies, whether it's a propulsion plant on a ship that can actually travel or barges with power plants on them that will emerge from this effort, have a clear dual-use potential. And I've used a dotted line here for this circle because it sort of, merits that we pause here and think about exactly what we're talking about and, very importantly, what we're not talking about, right? What we're not talking about is sort of nuclear technology to propel a warship, okay? Now, I used to do that, and those reactor plants have attributes that allow them to be very effective in terms of propelling a warship. All of our submarines and aircraft carriers are nuclear powered. That's not what we're talking about here. As you can imagine and are very, very familiar with, that type of technology is very, very strictly controlled. And so we want to keep it that way for really good reasons. What we're talking about here, though, is all of those technologies that would be so beneficial in the commercial sector, just propelling container ships and such, also have a dual-use aspect in a military context. And so we're thinking about, logistics. And, you can imagine for most of the military deployments, one of the great benefits of being insulated by two oceans is that you've got the strategic advantage that brings, but you've got to get across, right? And so, that requires sometimes just sort of vast amounts of cargo and people to be moved. And so, this type of technology in a dual-use capacity, coming kind of in from the commercial sector to serve perhaps a military purpose, is another great advantage. And, furthermore, whether it's a commercial or a military application, as these ships go to more increasingly remote parts of the world to set up maybe to offload cargo, maybe to support some kind of a military deployment, they bring power with them. And so, again, sort of flipping the script a little bit, you can imagine this ship coming in, and instead of shutting down its power plant, it keeps it up, it plugs into the port and provides power that's so badly needed in some of these remote areas. Okay, and so and in doing so, also, they further de-risk the operation because a lot of the vulnerability comes in just sort of getting fuel out to these remote areas. And so nuclear has the ability to eliminate that logistics chain altogether. All right, final circle is climate security, which is also a dotted line. And, climate security is in the news these days. I think that everybody would say that it's real. And the other really benefit of new nuclear for maritime and nuclear in general is that, in addition to all of the attributes that we've already discussed, you kind of get climate security for free, right? And so this is just sort of a collateral benefit. And I'll tell you, I've participated in a number of exercises around the world and real-world situations, right, that were really kind of motivated by, terrible storms, droughts, et cetera, which have very disruptive effects on local populations that, again, sort of need responsive power so that they can stand up desalination plants, et cetera. And so, I think that to the degree that we can be smarter and more responsible as we continue to meet the increasing energy needs of the nation and the globe, we can do so responsibly. We can do so with a mind for doing this more mindful of the climate and the ecology. All right, so I think that new nuclear for maritime has a collateral benefit. Well, we can feel good about its impact on the environment. How cool is it that we can be involved in something that allows us to contribute to so many varied dimensions of national power, right? New nuclear kind of sits in the maritime, sits at the nexus of all four of those things. And not many ideas can do that. So we can all feel good about our leaning into this with vigor to benefit the security and prosperity of our nation and the prosperity and security of our allies. Okay? Let's go to the next slide now. There's one security I'm not really interested in spending too much time on, and that's kind of inbox security, all right? And I think you all know what I mean, because we're all slaves to it, right? We all go to work, and the first thing we do is we open up our email, and there's our inbox, and we've got our to-do lists, and we've got 157 emails since I, shut my computer last night at midnight, and boy, you could really kind of get trapped by that. And there's a security, I think, that comes with that, right? We can fool ourselves sometimes that we're really, making a difference. This, I think, requires us to sort of lift our eyes up towards the horizon, get out of our inbox. This is not yet on too many people's to-do lists, right? Where people have due dates and requirements. That's growing, and that's a good news story. It's complicated, it's difficult, this endeavor we're on together. It requires us to kind of be energetic and commit ourselves to it, but it's eminently doable, and it's worth every effort it takes to make this a priority. All right. One other thing related to this inbox security, which is just sort of a cute way of saying complacency, I think that there's a new twist to the plot, right? And that is, we're not in this competition alone, right? We're not the only ones striving for this. I think it was December 2023 where China made a very public declaration that they're in this game to win it, all right? And so, and Russia has, of course, been in this space as well. They're moving out. They're building new nuclear technologies for both terrestrial and maritime uses. They're developing the technology. They are producing the jobs and economic power, and they will put to sea when they're ready to put to sea. And by virtue of doing that, I think they'll get first mover advantage on us in a tremendously important way. Two real, important dimensions of that. One is by default, it will be, they will, that team, if you will set the regulatory and safety framework for global operation of maritime nuclear, all right? And I would argue that the United States needs to be at that table in a leadership position when those rules are decided. And you've got to have skin in the game to be at that table. And so there's the safety and regulatory dimension. And then, of course, there's the commercial dimension, right? And so there's, as you'll hear today, and I'm sure McCall will tell you, there's a tremendous addressable market out there for all of us as well. And we want to be the ones to seize that market, right? We want to be in that market in meaningful ways and competitive ways. And so there is a degree of urgency in this because, the race is on, all right? From both a sort of a safety and regulatory standpoint, who's going to govern the application of this, but also just the economic dimension of it as well. All right, I think that we all might also agree that government has some really important roles to help move this along, right? And I've just listed 4 here for discussion and thought. One is that clearly, with respect to licensing and approvals and all of that, it's inherently governmental, right? And when you talk about nuclear and maritime, you've got a number of different regulatory regimes that all have to kind of come together and harmonize. And a lot of those, in fact, I think all of them are inherently governmental. And so, the government can really assist us to a tremendous degree by kind of leaning forward when it comes to licensing, approval, et cetera, regulation and policy. I would argue too that since we're talking first of a kind of many of these types of technologies, historically when it takes, when it's something this big, the federal government and state governments can lend a big hand by being first customers to help kind of drag the technology through the knothole of the learning curve, lend assistance to get the first of a kind and done, right? Those first few, lend some assistance, even if it's in a public-private type of an arrangement. They've got the resources and really the strategic motivation to do that. And just as, kind of on the flip side of that coin, they might also help with other teams becoming first customers, right? Particularly in the beginning, a team may not be able to just sort of bring the resources together to adopt these technologies, and the government can help them, again, sort of being not only, kind of the first customer, but maybe helping in terms of teams, adopting this technology, being first providers. And then, finally, right along with that economic growth that we talked about, a lot of that, perhaps even the limiting part, is going to be the workforce. And the government's always effective when they put their mind to it in terms of standing up the institutions to, recruit, train, and deploy that workforce in this, growing nuclear and maritime economy that we're talking about. So just, as we think about this, we've got to be mindful of the teaming we need to do with our friends and partners in the government to move this forward. Now, as Toby mentioned, this is just in closing, this is a very, very ambitious schedule. I think I've put us behind already, Toby. I apologize. Sorry. When I was thinking about joining the team and helping McCall and Core Power, people would pull me aside and say, hey, look, just be careful, because those Core Power guys, they're kind of crazy. They are, this McCall guy he's like a small modular reactor in and of himself. And they're very aggressive in making, pushing to make this happen. And I got to tell you, I'm super comfortable with that, right? Because without that type of energy, this is just not going to happen, right? And so, again, I'm just super excited and thrilled with the energy in this room. I know it's only going to build, and so I look forward to a fantastic day today. Let's get this going. Let's get this thing moved up on our action lists and our to-do lists. And during the conference today, you're going to hear from some of the very best thinkers in the world, the movers and shakers in this area. And they are representatives that are dedicated and come from teams that support each element of national power that we talked about. And so, my vision for success is that by the end of the day, everybody in this room will leave here with a sense of purpose and, specifically what each one of us must do to move this thing, from a very high potential into reality. The markets are waiting, our nations are waiting, the workers are waiting, the shippers are waiting. What's not waiting is our competitors. And so let's move out and get to this. Thanks very much.